Hey everybody, Brian Zane here. A few weeks ago, to celebrate 100,000 YouTube subscribers, I asked you guys to submit questions to me for a special Q&A episode. Well, the time has come, here we are, and here we go. I got a lot of questions about me personally, like how old I am, where I'm from, that sort of thing. So without getting too specific, I turned 31 years old back in January of this year. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I went to school at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and for the last 5 or 6 years I've been living in Reno, Nevada. I have a wife and child. I work my day job. I work in television. That's about as specific on that front as I want to get with you, but that's a little bit more about me personally. When did I become a fan of wrestling? A lot of people ask me that question. Well, like I've said in the past in previous videos, I became a fan about the springtime of 1998. Really, King of the Ring 98 and immediately before and after that was my most vivid early memories of wrestling. But you know, it all started back, when my friend rented a copy of WCW versus NWO World Tour for the N64. Neither of us knew anything about WCW or the wrestlers or anything in the game. We just loved the gameplay and we played it to death for an entire weekend and we fell in love with it. He didn't really go on to follow wrestling, but I did. I looked up WCW on TV and I found Nitro, and then I found myself flipping back and forth between Nitro and Raw every Monday night, and that's kind of how it all began. The rest is history. Who are my favorite and least favorite wrestlers on the current roster? Well, as said in my top 8 favorite wrestlers video, my favorite would have to be Brock Lesnar for the reasons I explained in that video. Now, as far as least favorite, I don't really, see, that's the thing. The way I operate, I don't really hate any wrestlers. I don't have a least favorite. It's really just apathy. It's like the ones I care about, the ones I don't. So it's the one I care the least about. I mean, I don't know, Hornswoggle, the Great Khali, lots of the jobbers you see these days. I don't really care that much about them. I mean, I wish them well, but there's none I really say, oh, I hate that guy. I don't really feel that way about anyone. As sad as it is to say, I don't care that much about Roman Reigns. That's just the way they've been booking him. But that's how it is. Who was my favorite wrestler growing up? Well, I'd probably have to say it was a toss-up between Stone Cold and The Undertaker. I mean, because those two were embroiled in the big rivalry in the spring and summer of '98. And bleeding into '99 as well. But The Undertaker with his Lord of Darkness look, and I loved his theme music at the time, and the whole is he in cahoots with Kane? I thought that was really cool. Over time, I still like The Undertaker, I still appreciate The Undertaker, but I think I like Kane just a little bit more just because of the mystique he had and the really cool badass red and black outfit. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I'd have to say Undertaker, Austin, and a little bit of Kane when I first started watching. What's my favorite theme song in wrestling? Well, I did mention just a minute ago how I like The Undertaker's theme during '98, '99, but honestly, my favorite theme of all time, the most badass theme in my opinion, has to be Dan the Beast Severn. If you've never heard his music, pause this video, open a new tab, and look up his song and play it. You won't regret it. Favorite belt design? I'd have to go with the WWE Undisputed title after they merged the WWF and the World Championships together the first time back in 2002. I mean, I think it was a really simple, clean look, very classy looking belt. To this day, I kind of wish they hadn't retired it so soon and gone with the John Cena version. The fact that this John Cena version, the spinner belt, lasted so much longer than the Undisputed Championship, always kind of stuck in my craw. Nothing against John Cena, I still like the design. But yeah, Undisputed Championship to me is my favorite belt design. Favorite match of all time? Okay, I've got a couple of serious answers and I got a silly one later on, so bear with me on that one. But my first couple serious favorite matches have to be kind of a toss-up between Angle Lesnar at WrestleMania 19 for the championship. Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 25. It was kind of the one match that kind of saved that WrestleMania from being a total dumpster fire, in my opinion. So yeah, those are two great matches. Now, a match that I really enjoy because of just how vividly I remember it. Now, there was a Raw in 1999 when Al Snow and the Road Dogg were feuding for the Hardcore Championship. Might have been early 99, late 98. I'm pretty sure it was early 99. But anyway, this is just after Al Snow got the bloodbath from the Brood, and he still had the blood caked on his gear, and Road Dogg was a champion. They were trading the championship back and forth, and then there was this match where they went outside the arena, and it was snowing out, so the visual of the snow and the wrestling and the blood caked on Al Snow was just so crazy. And the finish was Road Dogg pile driving Al Snow onto a wooden pallet and then pinning him for the championship. That was just a crazy match to watch, and for some reason that one's really stuck with me visually, so I have to give the nod to that one as well. Which current wrestler in WWE would I put in the main event? That's kind of tough because there's people I do want to see in that position. They're already almost kind of there. Like Dean Ambrose is someone I would put there, but he's pretty much on the bubble anyway at this point. Again, I'm taping this before WrestleMania, so I have no idea what's going to happen at WrestleMania, so forgive me if I'm saying anything that's dated. But I'd put Ambrose in that position. I would put Kevin Owens in that position. Wade Barrett, if he were healthy, I would put him in the main event scene right away. Sami Zayn, I think especially he and Kevin Owens come up together would be great if the timing worked out. I think having a believable underdog face makes everything just feel so much better. And I mean like a realistic underdog, not like Cena. He's not a realistic underdog the way he was portrayed in the past. So probably those guys I mentioned would be the people I would want to put in the main event world title scene. I got a lot of questions from people about how I would book a certain wrestler, how I'd book a certain show. Really, to answer your question, I don't really do fantasy booking. No disrespect to the people like Adam from What Culture and the people I see on blogs who do all fantasy booking stuff. That's great. To me personally, I just don't have the time and the energy and the mental capacity to devote to fantasy booking. So if you ask me how I'd book something, I couldn't answer it for you. I'd say go watch What Culture if you want fantasy booking. A fan asked me how I felt about Paul Heyman being the only manager in WWE and whether or not I think there should be more managers in the company. First of all, I think it's unfortunate the only people who are allowed to be managers in the company these days are either young guys on NXT who are wrestlers first and they just happen to talk well too, so they put them in that position, or multi-decade veterans of the business like Dutch Mantel and Paul Heyman. I wish the company would take a look at people out there in the indie scene who might not be able to wrestle, might not have like the body, might not have a look, but can offer other strengths to get people and things over for managerial purposes. I think there's a place for people who don't wrestle in WWE, but I mean, that's not the current business model. They bring people who have looks and have athletic qualities, who are wrestlers first, and then they mold them into managers. And I wish that it were kind of like the olden days in that regard. That being said, I think there should be a limit on how many managers occupy a show at one given time. I think no more than 2, 3 at the absolute maximum, but 2's kind of like the limit as far as how many managers should be. Like back in the 80s, there was like Slick and Blassie and Elizabeth and Albano, and like there's 18 different managers, and it was just kind of ridiculous to see that. It was kind of a glut of managers, and now there's like almost no managers. I kind of want something in between there. Like I think, again, 2, maybe 3 for a show is probably the tops. People ask me if I keep up with independent wrestling, like do I watch this fed or that fed, do I watch this thing? You know, honestly, I don't keep up with independent wrestling all that much outside of my own territory, which is Nevada and Northern California. I don't really pay attention to it. I mean, I read a little bit of stuff on the news sites about them, but I mean, between my workload and my responsibilities in this job and in my shoot job, I don't really have a whole lot of time. I'd like to watch and ingratiate myself more to the independent scene outside of the YouTube clips I see here and there on Facebook and on YouTube. I just don't have the time. Moving on to my short-lived wrestling career, got a lot of questions from people asking me all sorts of different things about me as a wrestler, and so I'll give you the gist of it here. You know, as far as what inspired me to want to become a wrestler, you know, I was a fan from middle school on, and even then I had kind of fantasies of, oh, I could be this character, I do this cool thing, you know, and that kind of stuck with me for a long time, but then you know, it went down after a while as the years went on. But then in college, like right after I started college, I discovered that up in Portland, my hometown, Buddy Rose and Colonel LeBeers had a wrestling school there. So I thought, well, the time is right. I'm young, you know, I feel like I could take this on. And so I signed up, and then that's how it all happened. What was my gimmick? I didn't really have a gimmick when I started wrestling, honestly. I mean, if you watch my matches of me in Portland wrestling as the jobber in the purple tights, I was basically the jobber in the purple tights. I was the young, happy, fresh-faced go-get-em kid from Eugene, Oregon, you know, just happy to be there. Because, you know, and honestly, I think that's kind of how I was in real life. I was just happy to be part of it, honestly. As far as, you know, people ask what my finishing maneuver was. I didn't really get to use a finishing move all that much. If anything, it'd be the DDT, probably. I think that's a move that needs to come back as a finisher, in my opinion. Obviously, that door is closed. It's never gonna get that way again. But for a brief time, that's the move I wanted to use. as a finisher. Did I want to be a face or a heel? I think ultimately I liked being a heel better, which is why I enjoy being a heel now as a manager. You know, I think looking back on the people I looked up to when I trained to wrestle, like the ones I emulated the most in terms of promo style and everything, like Chris Jericho and Roddy Piper. Like those were my two biggest influences as far as characteristics go, and they were both amazing heels. So I think naturally I wanted to turn that into a heel thing as well. Did I ever win matches? You know, once or twice maybe in the grand scheme of things. In the year that I worked, I can count maybe like 2 or maybe 3 times I won a match, you know, and they were never convincing wins either. It was usually in some kind of multi-man tag thing, or in the case of one match where with the clown guy Sideshow, he knocked me out and he felt bad, so he laid me on top of him. So, you know, it's not a very dubious win-loss record. It was mostly losses. Did I ever win a title? Funny enough, yes, I did hold a title for one day. When I was a manager, I was managing a tag team. They were the tag team champions, and one guy couldn't make it to the show for the title defense, and so I held the belt in his place, and we defended it that night, and we lost it that night. So for less than like 20 minutes, I was the champion, but I still count it. Do I still perform in wrestling? No, I don't. I mean, I pretty much, the door's closed and people ask me, do I want to get back in the ring again? No, I don't. At my age and, you know, the way my body is now, I don't really feel like getting back into ring shape. I don't think I can anymore. It's just not happening. I mean, I'll get back in the ring for, you know, maybe a one-off comedy match here and there, but I don't expect to ever try and wrestle full-time again. That ship has sailed. I just think me wrestling never worked out because mentally I understood how to do stuff, but physically I didn't have the coordination and the ability to make it look good, which is why I didn't wrestle for that long, why I transitioned to being a manager. People ask me how I became a manager. It was because after about a year of wrestling, I was just being a jobber everywhere I worked. And then the promoter I was working for at the time, he said he saw a promo I cut I put it on my YouTube channel for an upcoming match. He says, well, you know, it's like, gosh, you're not really a great worker, but you can talk well, but you don't talk very well as a face, which is what I was. So it was, well, what do you think about me being a manager? And it was, I took a couple days to think about it, weighing the pros and the cons. Basically, if I stay wrestling, I'm not going to get much work anymore because I'm kind of exposed as being a bad wrestler, you know, or I could switch to being a manager and play to my strengths. So that's what I wound up doing. I became a manager, and that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years. I was asked what the best and the worst parts were about transitioning from wrestling to managing. I will say, if you become a manager, your body thanks you for it because you're taking way less bumps over the course of your career. You're not putting yourself in as much risk or as harm's way, so it's great. But the trade-off is when you're a manager, you run the risk of not getting as much work because managing is a very secondary position in the grand scheme of things. You are not as vital to the story as the wrestlers themselves. So unless you're friends with the booker or you are the booker or you're just an amazing manager who cannot be left out of a show, in my experience at least, this was the case for me, I did not get as much work as I would have hoped to, as what I tried to do in the years I've been managing, because managing is not as high a demand thing as one would hope. Has my family supported me in my wrestling endeavors? No, they never did in all the years from being a fan to being in the business. They just have not cared, or at the absolute worst, hated it. When I was watching it as a fan, when I was a kid, they said, don't watch it because it's sleazy. And then when I became a wrestler and started training, they said, don't do it because it's not safe. So their priorities changed a little bit depending on what I was doing. And so when I became a manager, they were more approving of what I was doing because I wasn't hurting myself as much, but they've never really gone to any of my shows. I think my dad went to one show my entire time as a wrestler. So, you know, they have a tacit approval. They've never been wrestling fans, so I don't expect them to come out and see it. But yeah, that's my relationship with my family over my wrestling career. What's with the spray bottle? You see it on my dresser, you see it on my gimmick, you see it on the shirt. What's the spray bottle all about? I get that question all the time, especially for the Q&A. So let me just tell you what the spray bottle is all about. When I started managing back in 2007, I think with my second or third time I was managing, I brought the spray bottle out and I was managing these two guys who were kind of an unlikely, reluctant tag team. And at one point in the middle of the match, they just started like shoving each other and wanting to come to blows, and I had to spray them like a couple of cats. Who were fighting. I said, stop doing that right now. And it was just kind of an inside joke. It was something stupid, but it stuck. And that just kind of became part of my gimmick. It was my megaphone. It was my tennis racket, you know, even though it doesn't really do any damage because it's just water. But there you go. That's what the spray bottle is all about. That is the Brian Zane gimmick. If I could manage a team in WWE, who would it be? I loved that question. If you could drop me into any era, which tag team could I pick? I would have to pick of the litter. Basically, if it was the old school stuff, I would love to have managed like the Funks or the Brainbusters or Demolition. I think that would have been really cool. I think my style of managing would have fit well with that. As far as like current era stuff, I think because there's so few tag teams out there these days, and I think the ones that do need a manager or could use a manager to spice it up a bit, I would say like the Revival or the Ascension, or maybe even the Hype Bros in NXT. I think I would get along great with that because I've been able to work with like serious old school style teams and like the goofy, silly teams too. I've been able to kind of bridge that gap. So yeah, I think I'd be good with those teams. My biggest mark out moments in wrestling. As a rule, I try not to mark out specifically. I don't try and go, oh my God, I loved you when you were doink, I try not to do that because it's very kind of a no-no in wrestling. I think it's okay to be a mark because at the beginning, we're all kind of marks, but I try and you gotta keep that close to the vest when you're in the business. Be that as may, I would say the things I'm most proud of having done in wrestling was getting to manage guys like probably the biggest name I've ever managed was former NWA champion, the Almighty Sheik. We only worked a couple of times together, but we had some great stuff. I think we had a lot of good chemistry. Unfortunately, the angle we were involved in at APW didn't work out for different reasons, but I was happy with what we did together. Getting to be in the ring and be involved in matches and manage guys like Gangrel, he's a really cool guy. Garrett Dillon, Jody Christopherson, he was Garrett Dillon in NXT briefly. Evolve champion Timothy Thatcher, I've managed him once or twice. Brilliant wrestler. Getting to work with these guys of that quality, of that caliber, has been a really great moment of pride for me. And of course, the stuff I'm most proud of in the history of this show, Wrestling with Regret, is getting to work with guys like Jim Mitchell and Jim Cornette and Tyrus. Those have all been amazing experiences. And not to mention the crossovers I've done with guys like Phaelus and Game Show Garbage and Adam from What Culture. And there's more to come for both ends, I hope. I hope to work with more people in the wrestling business. I hope to work with more wrestling YouTubers. I'm really proud of what I've done so far. Would I ever work for WWE or another big company? I got that question a lot. Yeah, I guess. If the money was right and if it was the right move for me and my family, honestly, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it because I don't think it's ever going to happen. But there you go. If the ultimate opportunity came to work for WWE, sure, I would work for them. Let's move on to the show itself. Questions about Wrestling with Regret. People ask me, why did I start the show? How did it all come to be? Well, it all started several years ago. I'm a big fan of guys like Nostalgia Critic, Todd in the Shadows, Phaelus, Angry Video Game Nerd, stuff like that. That type of review, that kind of criticism video, I like a lot. But as I was watching this stuff, I looked around, I realized there wasn't a whole lot, there was nothing that I could see an equivalent for wrestling. There's plenty of people on YouTube who talk about wrestling, but it's usually audio-based, or it's just a guy in front of their webcam with no production value talking about how crappy Raw was that night. But I thought, I could do better than that. I can do a wrestling equivalent of the Nostalgia Critic and that sort of thing. So I had the idea in my head for like a year before I finally pulled the trigger on it in June of 2013. Once I finally pulled the money together, and got the time to write scripts and figure out subject matter. And that was kind of how it all began. It was something I just wanted to do, kind of the wrestling equivalent of those shows. Took me a while to figure it out how to get it done, and then I started doing it. Why do top 8s instead of top 10s? I get that question all the time, so I'm going to address that right here in this video. Why do top 8s instead of top 10s? Well, first of all, part of it does have to do with a bit of laziness, I will admit. Sometimes I don't really want to come up with 10 things in a topic to talk about. Sometimes it's hard to come up with 10 really solid entries in a top 10 for me. So 8, I think part of it's laziness, but another thing of it is, everybody does top 10s. Everybody does top 10s. Nostalgia Critic does top 11s. But everybody much else does top 10s. So in my mind, why should I try and be like everybody else? Why not? I'm trying to find all these different ways for my channel to stand out as much as possible. So why not do top 8s instead of top 10s? That's kind of my reason, just to stand out, be a little different. What's my favorite episode I've done? Well, quite frankly, I think my favorite episode so far has been one of my more recent ones, my Heroes of Wrestling review with Adam from What Culture. It was my most requested crossover, my most requested topic, and I finally got to do it in just grand fashion. It was really cool working with Adam and getting to have Jim Mitchell, the Sinister Minister, Ol Sinmin, on my video was just an amazing experience, and it was a lot of hard work. There was a lot of false starts and technical issues for me that made it a real pain in the butt at times to get it out there. But once I did, I feel it was really worth it because I'm really proud of the work that I did and how it all came out. So yes, easily, Heroes of Wrestling is my favorite one. I think as far as like pure joke content, I loved my Jesse Ventura movie review, my top 8 gimmick matches countdown, my top 8 worst debuts. A lot of stuff from this season, season 5, is some of my favorite stuff, my strongest stuff. And that concludes this Q&A episode of Wrestling with Regret. Thank you guys so much for submitting all those questions a few weeks ago. I really appreciate it. Sorry if I didn't get to your question or didn't answer your specific thing in this edition. Who knows, maybe when I hit 200,000, you can ask it again, and maybe next time I will respond. So be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, comment below, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane. I'll see you next time.